Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to the Econobox garage. Come on in. Well, in the previous video, you will have seen that I got the dashboard all recovered and the holes cut out. And now I'm going to fit most of the gauges and switchgear into the dash. It's been suggested that I do so and get all the wiring done, or as much of the wiring done, out of the car as possible. Just makes it easier to install. There's a couple that I'll have to do with it in the car, such as the combination gauge here, because um, it has the line that goes to the front of the car to the radiator. That has to be run, so that will go in afterwards. But the only electrical connection on that is the light anyway, so that won't be an issue. I can actually hook that into the harness as required. Now, again, I'm using the harness I got from AutoSparks. I'll put a link to that in the description below. So what I have is I have the fuel gauge here. That'll have 3 wires going to it. That's the light, and then the wires from the harness here. I have the speedometer, and that goes in this hole. And again, it just has the 2 wires going to it, but I'll get that in place. In this hole goes the signal light indicator. That's that one there. And then this is for the plinth, or the plinth for the steering column. And then that will just go on something like that. I did have to pick up some screws for that. I only had one of the original ones, and those are just a number 6-32. Now it calls for 5/16. The shortest I could get at Lowe's was 3/8, so I'm sure those will thread all the way down. I'm not too worried about that. So that one will go in there, so I can loosely attach that, and it'll give me a bit of wiggle room for when the steering column goes in. Tachometer, and again, it just has the 2 connections. I have just the light for the tach itself, and then this light here is for the high beam. I'm just going to backtrack a bit here to the speedometer. The bottom light is for the ignition. Now I am missing the little colored lenses. This one should be a red lens for the ignition light, and for the high beam light it should be a little blue lens. So I'm going to figure something out that I can get the blue light on that one and the red light on that one without taking the gauges apart. I have cleaned them up with some 4/0 steel wool, and they've cleaned up quite nicely. And so that's the gauges. I have the windshield wiper switch with a new knob. There's the original. It still has the W on it, but it's kind of gone brownish and the white paint is faded. And I got a new one for there. This is the signal switch, or the signal light switch, and that goes in this hole here. I have the windshield washer pump, which is a new one. The car originally came equipped with it, but when I got the car, that was not in place. That goes in this hole. I've got a new starter cable with the S on it. That goes in this hole here. I've got the grab handle for the passenger. That goes in these 2 holes here. And I have the heater control switch, which again, I bought a new knob for that one. This one was actually broken. I tried gluing it back together, but it didn't work too well. And again, the H is almost gone from that one. I did buy a new choke cable, and this is one of the locking types. And I probably should have checked this beforehand, but I've just realized that the hole required for this is bigger than what is on the car. So I'm going to have to carefully drill this out to accommodate the new choke cable. The other major thing I've done is I bought a new ignition slash headlight switch from Bugeye, along with their clamp kit for the back of the back of the ignition switch. So what this does is there's 2 Let's turn it over. There's 2 set screws here that clamp these 2 pieces of aluminum onto the switch itself. And then there's 4 other set screws that will screw and push against the back of the dashboard. And what Bugeye Guide also does is reinforces all the connectors on the back of the switch to help reduce the chance of those coming apart. The original ignition switch I had was in very, very poor shape, so that's one of the reasons I decided to go with this. So I've got a new keys, a new tumbler, new switch, and the clamp here. So here's the grab handle that this is all you'll see inside the cabin, is that, and then this piece of wood goes on the back side of that just to reinforce the whole thing, and with the nuts and washers, so I'll get that put in first. Okay, well, there's the grab handle on, and then the higher side goes towards the middle of the car and the lower side goes to the outside. I've also got the little panel light switch installed underneath. That's just with 2 small screws. So let's get on to the next thing. Okay, I've got the signal light indicator in and the steering column plinth, and I've just got that loosely in place. There will be some things I'll have to do from underneath, and one of them will be to tighten this up because this has got a bit of play in it to go where the steering column goes. So I am quite prepared for that. What I'm going to do before I go any further, so I'm going to use my step drill or Christmas tree bit and drill this hole out. So I'll have to be very careful that I don't rip the vinyl on that. So before I get that hole drilled out, I'm just going to pull the cable out and see about covering up this part of the housing here to make it look a little bit nicer. So I mentioned a little earlier, I peeled the backing or the fabric backing off the vinyl. So all I'm left with is the vinyl itself, and I'm hoping it'll be a lot easier to work around and be able to get it folded underneath here. Now this is quite a bit larger than what I'm trying to cover, so I'm going to glue it onto this face first, let it set up, and then I'll come back and trim it and cut some notches in it and just fold it under and go from there. So I've decided to go with just using super glue to attach this, and it's already worked quite well. So now that the top is glued on and it's sticking quite nicely with the super glue, I'm just going to trim this around so it's not quite as large and put some nicks in material so I can fold it under and glue it to that bottom edge. Okay, just have it loosely clamped in the vise so at least I can get to the edge here, and you can see I've already trimmed it back. So now I'm just going to snip around the side here a bit so I can fold this over without it bunching up. And I'll just put dabs of super glue around the inside here. There's a bit of casting flash here. I'm going to file that off before I do anything else. So you can see here I'm just kind of folding the edges over and gluing them down kind of a tab at a time. And so I'm just going to continue going all the way around, get that glued into place, and then I'll work on the hole on the dash and see what the end result looks like. The new choke cable requires a larger hole than the old one, but I can't simply just go and drill this out because the new one has a flat spot across the top here. So what I'm going to have to do is carefully mark out on the back of this one a larger diameter to fit this, and then mark off where that flat spot goes, which is at the top. So then I'll just take a file that out, being careful not to rip the vinyl. Okay, I've marked the hole out, and I don't actually have to take an awful lot out of there, but it's just that much bigger. I'm just going to double check my measurements and get the round file out and start and get to work. I'll also need a bit of flat file to do this little straight edge along the bottom here. Well, I'm glad I didn't get too far with this, because then I realized I'd had my mark for the flat spot on the bottom of the hole, which would be totally counterproductive. So I flipped my thing around, and now I can get to work and get that filed out to the right size. So there we go with the trial fit, and I think that looks really nice with the, it was worth putting the vinyl around the thing. The idea with the choke on this now is you can pull it out anywhere you want it and turn it and it'll lock, and do it that way and it'll go back down. So it's infinitely adjustable within the range of the choke itself. Quite happy with that. So now let's get back to putting the other stuff in the dash. I'm going to pull this out for now. It'll just be in the way with the long cord there. So on to the next thing. Okay, I have the signal light switch installed, and before I put anything else in here, I'm going to install ignition and headlight combo switch. Now initially there's just this weak a spring that goes on the back of here that engages in these two slots and ostensibly holds this in place, but they are known to be weak and don't do a great job. So what Bugeye guys have done is come up with this little setup here, and you'll see right here there's a bit of a tab on both the top and bottom halves of that, and these come apart, and the idea is this clamps around the body of the switch, and those two tabs engage in this slot here and the one on the bottom. So I'll push this through from this side to start with, and then this all goes on from the back. There are also tabs on the housing itself that go into the corresponding tabs or slots in the side of the perimeter of the hole. So I'll get that in there. Okay, let's get this turned over. I'm just going to pull the key out of there. So flip this over. So when doing this, you want to have the heads of the Allen screws that clamp this together facing the top. Otherwise it gets difficult to get that in or get them tight. And then also you want the tabs on the clamp to be towards the back of the dash as well. So that just goes over like that and clamps into there. So they also supply the necessary Allen keys with the job, or with the product. Let's get that straight. So I'll just tighten these up. And you can see how this would be really a bit of a challenge with the dashboard in. Okay, so I've tightened up those two Allen screws. Now you'll notice this is still loose on here. That's because you don't want to clamp the switch, otherwise you could compromise the function of it. So now, okay, I'm just going to make sure that this is still in the correct position. Flip it back over, hold that in place. And now, the idea is you take these 4 set screws and they tighten up against the back of the dashboard. And with the provided Allen key, just tighten those up evenly. Just do it in a bit of a star pattern. So that is good and solidly mounted now. I'm going to flip it over, and this is the switch for the headlights, side lights, and off for the lights. And this switch, this key here, simply turns the ignition on. So there's one other item installed in the dash, and you can see that that would be a bit of a challenge to get that in place while the dash is in the car. And now I've got easy access for the wiring and like that, but I'm getting ahead of myself again. So let's move on to the next item. I'm going to install the wiper switch. There, so that comes in from the back. And then we can get the chrome nut on there. I'll get it to where I want that. Just want a couple of threads. There we go. We'll put it there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tighten it on the back side. this tab here engages in that hole. It holds the knob in place, and it's hexagonal, so it's not going to spin on the shaft. So we'll just flip that on, so, and there we have the wiper switch. Well, I have the steering column cover loosely in place, and I'll be able to tighten that up from in behind. That gives me some wiggle room for that. And I've got the fuel gauge installed. I'm not going to install the combination gauge yet. The only electrical connection to that is for the lights, so that the bulb holder just pops off. So I'll be able to get that in quite easily. The reason I'm not going to install that prior to installing the dashboard is I need to route this pipe with the pickup for the heat that goes into the radiator through the firewall, and that would be easier to do with the dashboard installed. So let's get the speedometer installed and then the rev counter. Well, I'm very pleased with how this is looking. I've got the fuel gauge in place, speedometer, tachometer, most of the switch gear. This is for the choke. That'll go in once the dashboard's in the car, and then the same with the starter cable and with the combo gauge that goes here. So next up is to wire the back side of this with the wiring harness.
But that's all I have time for this week. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to share it with your friends, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that and you'll get notified when the next video comes out. And that next video will have me wiring up all the gauges and switches in the dashboard. My name is Ian, this is the Econobox Garage. We'll see you next time.